LBJ wasn't John Wayne, although his words killed many more people than John Wayne's blanks. LBJ said that his great-great-grandfather died defending the Alamo. It was a lie. His great-great-grandfather never even saw the Alamo until 10 years after it fell. Dick Goodwin, a pretty shrewd politician, said to Bobby Kennedy, "If you run, LBJ will drop out. He's a coward." What drove President Johnson out was Eugene McCarthy's campaign, and more importantly, the Tet Offensive of 1968, January. In the Tet Offensive, the Vietnamese captured 36 of 44 provincial capitals. They breached the United States Embassy in Saigon. They won a major military victory, which we claimed. The light at the end of our tunnel seemed dimmer and dimmer.
When Robert Kennedy indicated that he was going to announce on the weekend of March 16th, 17th, McCarthy chose to enter into both Indiana and South Dakota and announced at that time that he would. I think perhaps under nobody else's consultation with nobody else except perhaps Jerry Eller. And I'm sure most of that was motivated in order to provide Robert Kennedy with very few places he might run as, a candidate of an anti-war movement.
A variety of things went wrong in both Indiana and Nebraska. In Indiana, I suppose it was a question of judgments about the people who were in responsible positions. That at least was part of it. Part of it was the nature of the politics of the state itself. It's a very tough state politically, and in Gary and East Hammond and those kinds of places. We simply weren't prepared, I think, for the kind of politics that was going on there in terms of who owned which bosses and all that sort of business.
Indiana is more rural than some of the other states, and therefore the necessity to try and really get out into these towns and give people a sense of personal contact is more important than it is, say, in a big city state. And I think that really didn't seem to be done in the McCarthy campaign. Kennedy went to every town of 5,000 or over in the state. He worked 18 hours a day. He won that campaign on sheer energy and stamina.
Poor who are suffering. It's not just those who want a better education who are suffering. It's not only those who need jobs and employment who are suffering, but the whole country is suffering, and I don't think any of us can be satisfied or happy or contented or filled with joy while that war goes on and while that money is being spent and American lives are being lost in the devastation of Vietnam.
We must use the one power which is given to us as human beings, the power of reason, to make some judgment upon both life and history, and in this year to make some judgment upon the policies which will affect the history and the role of the United States in history, saying in effect that we will not accept that we have to do something in Vietnam, for example, because John Foster Dulles signed some kind of vague commitment 15 or 20 years ago, and I suppose not because Larry O'Brien, the former Postmaster General, last October spoke really as though he had strange powers. The discernment of the spirit of men who had lived in the past. This is a unique power and one which no administration should let go, it seems to me, as easily as the Johnson administration let him go over to another camp. because last October, I think it was, on the occasion of dedicating a 20-cent stamp in honor of General Marshall, the Postmaster General said that if General Marshall were alive, and I assume present at the dedication, that he would be supporting our Vietnam policy. Well, now Mr. O'Brien has gone over to a camp which does not support our Vietnam policy. And I think we should call upon him to explain, if he can, what the position of General Marshall is.
McCarthy's appeal is right where he thinks it is, which is amongst suburbanites, amongst the more educated, amongst the slightly more affluent. And there are very few of those in the Democratic Party in Indiana. The Democratic Party in Indiana is very much a party of lower-class ethnic workers and lower-class blacks. And he can't compete symbolically with the blacks at all, with Kennedy. And the lower-class workers did not respond as well as to McCarthy's more intellectual approach to politics as they did to Kennedy's more emotional and visceral approach.
Well, in Cambridge, to have been a McCarthy supporter was to engage the disdain, almost the contempt of those political intellectuals who'd been in and close to the new frontier. They behaved, acted, spoke as if power devolved on them and the Kennedys really au nature, as if it was a natural right. They thought that they were the political people. They had the feel for power. They had an instinct for how power should be seized and how power should be manipulated. To them, McCarthy and those of us who were his followers were rank amateurs, were unpolitical. And so that we thought that the unpolitical character of our campaign was really our strength and our virtue. They thought it was our weakness, our failing. One of them said to me, you know, if McCarthy became president, he wouldn't be able to get the right advisors around him.
Well, we used the same old rhetoric, at least, in his campaign. No new language. We're going to do better. We're going to get the country moving. We're going to do more. But beyond that, no specification as to which way the country is going to move or what we're going to do more of. Or what or how we're going to do better. And really, he's brought no new politicians to the scene. We've brought back Pierre Salinger from semi-retirement. Pierre. It's rather amazing where all the knights of the Round Table went in the interim.
Kennedy always felt he could have been beaten in Indiana. Always felt the right kind of campaign. But I think he put a lot of it, not only money and resources, but this absolute concentration. And finally, all the good people were pulled in from every other state to work just in Indiana on the theory that Indiana was the turning point. And of course, if Kennedy had been defeated in Indiana, he would have been through.
I think that's a great step forward. And I intend to go on trying to do that in the state of Nebraska, in the state of Oregon, and the state of California. And I hope to have the same support.
I don't think Indiana was a mistake. In fact, we did rather well in Indiana when you consider that it was a three-way race with roughly 30% in that contest with Brannigan. I think it would have been a very serious political mistake if we had said, well, we're going to give the field to you now that you've come in the first area of challenge. That would have been a much more serious political mistake than to have run as we did and to have come out as we did.
Facing and knowing the hard realities of the office, yet also knowing the potential for good which lies within it, I shall seek the nomination of the Democratic Party.
The stand taken by the Kennedy forces in Oregon was to ignore Senator McCarthy. They wanted to act as though he didn't exist. Quite obvious why they were doing this. They were saying to the voters, Gene McCarthy can't win, so you're just throwing your vote away.